Welcome back. You're watching Bottom Line. Well, around 19 bodies recovered so far, close to 200 people still feared missing as rescue operations continue non-stop since yesterday. Yes, we are talking about the glacier burst at Chamoli in Uttarakhand, which has caused immense damage to human life and property. So what are the lessons experts in the Northeast can take from this disaster? Are things inevitable in a way? Does the fact that climate change can perhaps never be a local issue compound our problems? Has this tragedy been caused by climate change at all? That is also the question we are asking tonight. To discuss the matter, I am being joined by Rituraj, Phukan, environmentalist and climate change expert from Assam. Again, environmentalist and former NGT Commissioner Meghalaya, Naba Bhattacharjee, will also be joining me from Kolkata in a short while. Coming straight to you, Mr. Phukan, welcome to Bottom Line. Well, it's a tragedy and very unfortunate. Do you, there are so many studies that seem to have hinted at something like this possibly happening. So, is it climate change related? Can we just say it's climate change related, or this is something which can happen naturally in a place like Uttarakhand at this time of the year?
Yes, at this time of the year is the key question because it's still winter and we don't expect a glacial outburst to happen at this point of time. But of course, climate change is related to what's happening across the Himalayas. The IPCC warned us back in 2007 that the Himalaya glaciers are, melting faster than the, most other places on Earth, and the consequences are going to be grave. But I think the point of time where people really were concerned, and the government of India also looked at it in a serious way, was when the Hindu Kush Himalaya assessment was published in January 2019. So that was like the first assessment of the entire region about what is happening due to climate change impacts in the Himalayas, and that looked into like 40 years of satellite observations, not only in India but also in China, Nepal, and Bhutan, and that clearly indicated that climate change is eating into the Himalayan glaciers. And there are tens of thousands of those glaciers that are receding. There are glacial lakes that are forming. There are which are quite unstable, and basically entire communities are sitting on the brink of disaster. At any time these lakes could burst. That was what was conveyed to us. And I think back in 2013 in Uttarakhand we saw that incident happen, and now again this is kind of a repeat of that similar incident. So I think such incidents are going to be happening more and more often as the entire region warms up.
A recent study, as you just mentioned about the reports, a recent study says that more than half the ice on the Hindu Kush may melt by 2100. I mean, that is barely over 70 years away, which is alarming to say the least.
Even more alarming is the fact that the Eastern Himalayan region, and for us at least, is the Eastern Himalayan region is has is poised to lose about one third of the glaciers by 2100, even if warming were to be contained at 1.5 degree above the pre-industrial levels, which is what the Paris Agreement was aiming for. But uh, suppose if warming continues at the rate that is happening today, then we are set to lose about 95% of the glaciers. And not only is that going to cause similar kind of disasters, but it is also going to affect the water and food security of our region, which is at present it's like a water abundant region. And to think that at one point of time it could be water stress is almost unbelievable. But a data driven study has also pointed out that this entire belt could be actually one of the among the four likely regions in the world where water wars are likely in the future. So this is huge for the future of the entire Hindu Kush Himalayan belt, but especially for northeastern India, because we are going to lose about 67% of the glaciers by 2100, even if we achieve the best targets of the Paris Agreement.
Now, when we talk about climate change, there is something which seems inevitable. It sounds inevitable. So, are we fighting a lost battle? That is the question that comes to the mind. Is there any way to escape? What can be done? Uh, well, a concerted effort globally would be the ideal answer. But is that even practical and possible? So, to cut it short, are we fighting a battle which we have perhaps already lost?
Not really. It is true that a lot of warming is already locked in, and even if we were to stop emissions, in the next few years, the amount of greenhouse gases locked in the atmosphere is going to keep warming the planet for quite some time. But having said that, what we can do is not to aggravate the situation. What we can do is to stop emissions at the point where we are now, and not make it worse by increasing our coal mines, cutting down forests, and such kind of things that we are having now in the name of prioritizing business, and hope that technological interventions, like for example, taking out carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, which is something that is becoming more and more feasible, and the proliferation of renewable energy will actually help us to turn back the tide. So I don't think it is inevitable, and considering the fact that the youth around the world have really reinvigorated the environmental movement, and they have come out on the streets, and these people will be in decision making positions in maybe within the next decade. So I think a lot of positive change is coming. So it is not something that, okay, human society is on the verge of collapse. What we are looking at to limit the damage, I think we can turn back the time. I am optimist.
Sound very optimistic indeed. We are trying to connect with Mr. Naba Bhattacharjee, former NGT Commissioner, Meghalaya, also environmentalist, was joining us from Kolkata. Well, we are still trying to connect with Mr. Bhattacharjee. Rituraj, Phukan, again, coming to the northeast, what are the lessons that we can take, we can derive from this Himalayan tragedy?
Well, adaptation is the key. We know what is going to happen. The projections are there. We have numerous scientific studies which have actually pointed out exactly where are the trouble spots going to be. The Indian government itself presented a report at COP25, naming Assam and Assam and Mizoram as the uh, states most likely uh, most affected by climate change in the Himalayan region among the 12 Himalayan states. So having known that, we also know why. So in fact, that report, studies by IIT Guwahati and other institutions, in fact, named the districts where these challenges will come up. So we know what is coming. So why not prepare for that? I think what is happening in Uttarakhand is that people are just not prepared. We are we know the risk. We are knowing that these things are inevitable. So we need to ensure that we take the adequate measures to protect the lives and properties of people, and also biodiversity.
Absolutely. But again, Northeast itself. Forget about the tragedy. I mean, even if we don't talk about the Himalayas, for Northeast itself is facing such massive environmental issues, which probably aggravate our problems, and things are not sadly heading towards the right direction, despite all the efforts. How much does that concern you?
See, I have always been saying for a long, long time that Assam is one of the early climate impacted regions in the world. the entire world is talking about the coming, dangers from floods and erosions, from displaced people, conflicts, human wildlife conflicts, all that we have been seeing for the last few decades. And we have also seen the resilience of the people, how we have developed, communities have learned to live with floods, although the increasing intensity and frequency of floods is creating new problems. But I think there are communities in the Northeast, in Assam particularly, who can show the world, uh, you know, a thing or two about resilience. And at the same time, Assam makes a fit case, if there was any in the entire world, for climate justice and prioritizing, uh, you know, uh, spending of money to ensure that people who are affected by the climate crisis are, in fact, adequately compensated.
All right. Finally, we've been joined by Mr. Naba Bhattacharjee. Mr. Naba Bhattacharjee, welcome to Bottom Line. Well, the tragedy in Uttarakhand. What is your assessment of the situation, and how serious a threat do you think is staring at us, especially when we speak about the future?
You see, it is a very sad incident, but it is not the first time. We all know the Eastern Himalayas belt, particularly Uttarakhand. Uttarakhand, because the fragility and its exposure, the terrain, which in the northeast, except for Arunachal bordering China, we don't have these glaciers. But as a whole, besides not being in the snow line, we also have a very fragile your geological formation and the terrain. And there are a lot of anthropologic factors which are impinging on the environment. So it is definitely not today. Decades earlier, this has been an alert and a wake-up call for the Northeast, particularly the hill states and the hilly regions. Here the factors, of course, cloudburst also has not been very pronounced in the Northeast.
Except for Arunachal, of course. In Arunachal, of course, we have had instances sometimes.
Yeah. But not been pronounced in the others, like we have in Uttarakhand, which also forms a part of the belt of the Eastern Himalayas, Uttarakhand and Himachal. But we have other factors. You see, whatever the FSI reports and all come, there is a massive depletion of the forest cover, which is number one, can be one of the reasons where we can see catastrophe of this magnitude happening in some of the hill states. Then we have the unregulated flow of water. The Northeast being a very high rainfall area, that also is creating a lot of distortion in the geological formation, the depletion of the topsoil. If you go to Sora or Cherrapunji, one of the wettest place, you will see the topsoil has been totally depleted, depriving even of the pioneer species, which is grass, growing there. So you see all the hills are becoming barren. The water is all flowing down. I'm taking a case study of Cherrapunji, which is very commonly known as the wet desert of the country, where we have 6 months of dry season in spite of receiving such heavy rainfall. And why this is happening? Because the conservation is not happening and the rainwater flows down due to the terrain at a very high velocity and changing the entire gully formation and other factors which are impinging on that. And that itself brings instability to the geological formation and the soil profile. So that's why I'm saying that I did a case study of Sora, but such situations prevail everywhere. If you go to Mizoram, you have seen what happens in Kohima and abroad, above as you go up from Dimapur to Kohima. In Mizoram, of course, the situation is far more precarious. the hill districts of Manipur, Arunachal Pradesh, of course, Tawang, Bombila, that side, Mechuka, Anini, all those bordering China. So as a whole, and if you recollect in the year 2002, when the sluice gates of a dam was opened for a few hours in China, what a catastrophe it created. More than 200 bridges, big and small, were washed away. Villages and towns were washed away. The bridge at Likabali, which connects the Siang districts, was totally gone.
While Arunachal has been witness to such tragedies, well, maybe not so much. Of course, Assam has the flood problem, but not so much of a sudden outburst in other states. So probably we still do not realize the dangers that we face. But continued the cutting of hills, the rampant destruction of forests, that is something that is going on in the northeast. And despite all efforts, there is not much of a concern there. If generally there seems to be not much of a concern about all this, does that scare you in a way, Mr. Bhattacharjee?
Yeah, it definitely does. And concern means, you see, whenever such an incident of this scale occurs, there are some initiatives, there are some concern shown, and that is also momentary, temporary. Once that case is over and things settle down, we are back to square one. So such an attitude will not help. You see, Uttarakhand today, the magnitude of the disaster could have been much more, but they have at least learned their lessons. If you go to Uttarakhand, I have seen, of course, you cannot fight and go against nature, but you can minimize the destruction, the death, which it carries along, whether it's a cloud burst or a glacier burst or whatever it is. But in the northeast, and another factor, Nabarun, which you are aware, is the mining.
Absolutely.
Where the land, when you are taking out everything, particularly when Meghalaya is concerned, from the underground, and what are you creating? You are creating aquifers and vacuums. If you recollect the last year, the Kasan tragedy, where the mines after mining, the level went down below the river. The mine level was below the river level, and you need not say, you can imagine, you did not spell out what will happen, and that exactly happened. The entire water came, and hundreds of acres were inundated underground, and when this caves in, the entire land profile changes. Yeah, and it can happen in a matter of hours. When you see a hill, you can see it's all flattened. Another factor, Nabarun, which is happening all over the northeast, is the cutting down of the hills, the quarrying system, which is happening. That also is changing the land profile totally. First, the vegetation is removed, and then you remove the hills, the hillocks, the sand mining for mining. That also is another major cause.
Absolutely. Rituraj, Phukan, when we say an impending danger, probably you don't see it immediately, and therefore it's human nature, there's not much of a concern. Is that a situation that we are facing in the region as well? Yes, there is so much of environmental concern, but we hardly do see protests. I'm not saying protest is the way to go, but protest, of course, is an expression of dissent, which we feel we have the right to. But that has never happened, probably because we don't realize how bad things can be 30 years down the line, and that is where the awareness part comes in. Can we create enough awareness? Even that is the concern.
I think so. Certainly, there are scientific reports regarding the glacial lakes and the dangers that are already hanging in Bhutan, and that could also impact the downstream people here in Assam. Uh, but the science is there, but I think we need more communicators. It's good that the media is increasingly focusing on climate change impacts, and is also looking at reports that project a precarious situation for the Northeast in the future. I mean, who would believe that we could, in the Northeast, in Assam, where we are at present water abundant region, and maybe 20-30 years down the line we could have a water problem. So it is almost unbelievable, but looking at the science, it is very clear that we are moving in that direction. uh, Therefore it's very important that there is increasing awareness. There are communicators who are able to connect the dots and connect the three
More than awareness, should it be
crises.
the policies also? Should it be the policies also? Probably just awareness will not do, and urgent
Yes.
policies maybe.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think the policies will only reflect the will of the people. I mean, politicians will take note of what the people want. And if there is large scale awareness and people will tend to talk more about it, we will see more things being written about, more of it being reflected in in the media, in art maybe. And only then will these concerns be reflected in policy decisions. Politicians will do what the people want them to do in the end. So I think the people really need to prepare themselves for the future that is not as good, and then ensure that we have educate adaptation, and that is exactly what adaptation is about, to prepare for the future. But we are not doing it. That's true.
Thank you so much, Rituraj Phukan, for your views. Thank you so much, Mr. Naba Bhattacharjee, for joining us. Well, we can only hope that good sense prevails. It's a challenging fight, and we have to be up to the mark. That's a wrap of Bottom Line tonight.